surface of what we know about broadband in Pennsylvania. It left me wanting to know more. As a reminder, today we will be recording this session. We've muted everyone but our guests for the beginning of this meeting until we get to the Q&A later in the hour, and then we'll see if we can allow any of you that might want to offer some questions or conversation. We do invite you to submit questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to get all of those questions included as time allows. At the conclusion of our time together today, we'll share where you can find the recording from today and our previous gathering. Today, I am pleased to bring back Sascha Meinrath, and we are joined today by Harry Crissy. Sascha is the Palmer Chair in Communications at Penn State and Director of XLab, an innovative think tank focusing on the intersection of vanguard technologies and public policy. Professor Meinrath is a renowned technology policy expert and is internationally recognized for his work over the past 2 decades as a community internet pioneer, social entrepreneur, and angel investor. Harry is a Penn State Extension educator in Warren County. His academic research concentration at Penn State University focused on economic sustainability. He holds a professional master certification from Villanova University in applied project management. He has been working as a regional extension agent for the past 14 years. Harry works with communities, individuals, and government bodies to identify and implement strategies conducive to both economic growth and environmental health. Thank you, Harry and Sascha. It's great to be with you today. You come really qualified for this conversation. So we're going to just go ahead and get started by inviting you each to tell us a little bit about the work that you're actually doing with broadband mapping, speed testing, and such. So Harry, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, sure. So I came into this game late, and working with people like Sascha and the Pennsylvania Utility Commission, we just figured we were trying to prepare for the RDOF auction last year, and we just sort of, I was winging it with my GIS. I was testing my GIS skills and gathering public data and putting it on a map. And so we have a number of maps available right now. If you go to Penn State Extension's website, you'll see, actually it's my page. And by the way, most of my graduate work was done at Penn State, not Villanova.
Oh,
so
okay.
Just to clarify. And we were doing this for the Pennsylvania Utility Commission because they wanted us to win at the RDOF auction, which I think we did quite well. We came in 7th in the country, and we're preparing for the next round of that right now. And if I'm allowed to share my screen real quick, I'm just going to walk you through some of what's available for Northwestern Pennsylvania. Okay. And I think I'm going to turn my camera off just to improve my speed. Okay, can everybody see a map?
Not yet, but it looks like we're starting to see your screen.
If this doesn't come up pretty quickly, I'm going to tell who my provider is because I pay $180 a month for this service.
Gotcha. We see it.
Okay, yeah, you guys are lucky. So I'm going to click on Warren County. So this is, first I'll walk you through real quick. So this button right here is going to zoom to whatever your location is. This, of course, is a home button. It'll take you to this screen. These are manual zoom buttons. This is if you type any address in, it'll zoom to that address. And here's your map key right here. And and this is a dynamic key, so it changes as you zoom. And over here, these are the layers that are available, the ones that are in gray. So I have all the towers up that I can get my hands on. The ones that are in gray are zoom dependent, so they'll show up in gray. You can change that by just adjusting it here. But anyhow, so this very quickly, I'm going to go to Warren County. I'm going to zoom to Warren County. And so in Warren County, these are the towers that are available. By the way, all these services are provided for free. Penn State Extension does this at no cost. So right now you're seeing what your current speed from the latest FCC filings are. Where you see the purple, there's no retail service available. Where you see gold, it's less than 25 megabits per second. And when you see green, that means you have what's considered by FCC standards broadband level service. And then you have these towers that are available. And right here, just for example, so I'm working with a lot, right now I have 9 counties that are participating in what I'm doing. They are giving me their parcel and building address data so that I can identify who's served and who's not served and what it will cost to serve them. So if I zoom to this one, this is one that Youngsville Television provided us their fiber data. And if you look here, I just built a buffer around a road file. And I put the building data in there. And I can say now, when I take this buffer, I can take the median distance from my road file. And I can say, here's what it's going to cost per drop to provide service from that existing fiber to these 30 sites that are on this. I just want you to understand that that's there. And right here's a tower. Again, this is all free. We're doing this for nothing. That tower is roughly 24 feet high, 8 meters high. So whatever data people make available to us, we're putting up there. And when the counties give us parcel data, which like Montgomery County, it's free, it's open, they have open source data. It makes it really easy for us to estimate what it's going to cost to provide fiber to the premise for their whole county. For the more rural counties, they're a little bit, we're working directly with the counties. If they want us to make it public, we will. If not, we'll keep it proprietary and we'll help you estimate the cost to bring fiber to every unserved premise in your county, or however you want us to analyze that. If you scroll down here on the key, so the way that this is, you're going to see it's a little confusing, and it's really just to make life easier for providers that we're doing it this way. Some of the stuff's going to disappear based on your zoom, like your speed level. So I have to go back out to my county level to see what speed I'm getting. But I can change that. Again, by going here and saying internet service, I want to be able to see this at a different level. So I'm going to zoom it out to the county level. The reason why I have to do that is because this is very data dense. Mm-hmm. And it slows the map down as I turn. You can see it's locking up on me right now.
And we'll be sure and share the link in our resources after today. So if people want to go in, you may be trying to figure out how you can get here. We'll make sure that you know how to get to this information.
And if you Google Penn State Extension with my name attached, it's going to take you right to my right to all these maps. So that's still not set properly. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. So I set the bottom out. So again, you can change that. It takes a little bit of goofing around with if you're not familiar with working with the GIS, but it's all again being provided for free. And here's what happens when we can build a statewide economic model for this next round of funding. We'll be better equipped. We did great. I think we did good. I think, seventh was good, but of course, California is going to beat us every time, but we want to do better than seventh. We want to beat Minnesota this time. So we're asking the counties to cooperate with us and providers. So the providers are working directly with us, which is great. They're opening up the doors to more data, and in return, we're doing analyses for them.
So Harry, can I ask you just for a little, as a layman, a little more to explain what you mean by that we are seventh and how the data informs that?
Okay, so we are the last round of funding. We had $16 billion available nationally. This is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, made available by the FCC. This is by a fund that you pay into on your phone bill. And if you win this reverse auction bid, you have to provide phone service, basically. So in this last round, only $9 billion was bid out of $16 billion available. So $7 billion was turned over into the next auction. So I think we have $11 billion available on the next auction, and we haven't been given a timeline on that. Sascha probably can answer this better than I. But so what we were trying to do is make the data available to the providers however they needed it, so that they could make their bids, because we wanted to. So our internet providers, whether they're in-state, so we were doing analyses for in-state providers. If it was out of state, we weren't really doing it, so that they were better equipped to bid at this auction. We think we could have done better. We think we could have provided better services. So that's what we're aiming for next time, and that's why we're working directly with providers, so that they can get more money to provide the service. It doesn't pay any of us in Pennsylvania to be opaque at this point. it's all going to be collaborative, and we want to really do well in the next auction, which is what California is doing.
Great, and I'll have some follow-up questions to talk about that a little bit. Sascha, why don't you pop in here and tell us about the work that you're doing around mapping?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I'm the bookend. So I got into this realm before the beginning, before it was sexy, and before we had expertise and experts like Harry that were sort of taking ideas and formulating really useful resources. What we had to do, in essence, was to create the first iterations of what this looked like. So I began this in earnest full time in 2006, looking at building broadband maps for the entire country. That first initiative, with the Cooperative Association for Internet Data Analysis, failed, and it failed for very specific reasons, none the least of which is we couldn't get support from the internet service providers, who adamantly didn't want the public to know where service was and was not. Now, in that failure, we learned a tremendous amount of, if we were to do this again, spoiler alert, we did, we would do it far smarter and wiser to not have those kind of dependencies. So into 2009, we spun up a project that was originally going to be a prototype called Measurement Lab. And Measurement Lab was a prototype to show to the FCC, here's how you could collect real-time data from the general public about the service speeds that they're receiving in their homes right now. And we started thinking like, oh, we'd run this for like a month or 3 months, collect some data, turn it over to the FCC, and they would then use that information in what was then going to become the National Broadband Map. Well, long story short, the FCC has systematically refused to collect that information, although this last year, after 10 years of terrible maps, they've now declared that their maps are bad and that they should implement a crowdsourced data collection effort. In those 10 years, however, Measurement Lab has now grown to become the largest open repository for broadband measurement data on the planet. So we collect about 750,000 tests per day. And if you were to go and open up a browser and go to Google and type in like broadband speed test, you'll see a box that appears above the search results, and that's us. Now, having built this resource, we have petabytes upon petabytes. We have literally now collected billions, with a B, billions of broadband tests. It begs the question, what do you do with all these data? And so for the state of Pennsylvania, we've been hired the last several years to basically start documenting what ground truth looks like, what on the ground reality looks like versus what these official measures, which have traditionally been overly optimistic, that's being kind, psychotically hyperbolic might be a more accurate assessment. And to give you an example, I just pulled the data from the FCC's January 20th report. It was released right before the inauguration on Venango County, Pennsylvania, which says that 100.0% of Venango County has 5x1 service, has 5 megabit by 1 megabit service, including 99.7% of the urban areas have 25 by 3 broadband. So you have broadband in pretty much all of the urban areas, and 83.9% of rural areas in Venango County have broadband. Now, I don't know every nook and cranny of Venango County, but I'd be willing to bet as much as anyone wants to lose that that is not the case. And it shows, in essence, how discrepant official metrics are from the lived experiences of people on the ground, not just in Venango, but all around the country. So through the Center for Rural Pennsylvania, we've been hired to, in essence, investigate what does Pennsylvania look like? And so we used Measurement Lab and about 11 million tests, a small subsample, as it were, of our overall data, and analyzed county by county what people were actually reporting as their speeds in their homes versus what the FCC was saying was available in those same places. And what we found, and again, this probably won't shock much of anyone on this call, is massive discrepancies, and massive discrepancies that were far greater for rural areas than for urban ones, which is to say, if you lived in the cities of Pennsylvania, those discrepancies were relatively modest. But as soon as you moved to rural areas, we were basically being told that everyone had connectivity, and yet what people were reporting is like really slow speeds. If they were lucky, they achieved broadband, but more often than not, they didn't. As a follow-up to that, we were then rehired by the Center for Rural PA to look at broadband pricing, which we did this past year and just finished delivering our report. And I can see that Senator Phillips Hill is on the call. She's been a champion in the State House calling for more documentation of these on the ground realities, and in essence, the mapping of the assets that are available. All this has spurred a lot of discussion inside the State House, and our broadband pricing analysis of this last year shows that dollar for dollar, for the same dollar, rural areas pay more and receive less service for that dollar, which is to say they're doubly disadvantaged. Like, not only are services worse, you're paying more for worse services when you're in rural areas of the state. Now, these both have been exploratory analyses, and what we've been asking, begging, and pleading for, in essence, is that not just at the national level, but at the state level as well, that we prioritize documentation of the collecting of empirical evidence. This is, if connectivity is a critical resource, especially in a post-pandemic environment, I just don't understand why we refuse to document it in the same way that we might, poverty rates and, child obesity and any other problem that we're trying to fix. Right now, key decision makers are kind of, bumping around in the dark because we just have terribly inaccurate and imprecise information when we deign to collect it at all. So a bunch of other geeks have said like 10% for science, right? If you're going to do a broadband mapping initiative, give 10% to the actual researchers and scientists that do this professionally. I bet that 10% will get you more accurate and more precise information than the other 90% that we're probably going to squander on another really poor national broadband mapping initiative.
So Sascha, a couple things have come up. One, will you be able to allow us to share some of your resources, linking to some of your? So we'll do that in our resources. So let you all know.
So for the past 20 years, 100% of my writings and research have always been public domain. So I view that as essential. And yes, everything I've ever produced is basically available for your use.
Great, super transparent. Thank you for your work in that. I will share at the end that we intend, as part of this series, to have a provider roundtable. So we'll have a chance to actually talk to providers. But one of my comments back, I think you'll agree with me, Sascha, is that in defense of providers, to a large extent, they're doing the work of trying to get out there. There's huge expenses to that, what we call the last mile. There's also the fact that sometimes a provider does everything they can do to get to your doorstep. And then depending on what's going on, I always say I'm just enough of an old telecom person to be annoying, but between the wire and the connections and the device on the other end and the user, you may not end up getting the same kind of speeds at your desk that the provider is actually making available to you, again, out of the pole. True?
Yeah, absolutely true. And there's many different things that impact broadband service. I think this is why it's also important to have comprehensive data collection, right? Absolutely. I would not equate availability of broadband services with the speed that people are actually, these are two separate data stores that tell us two separate things. What I will say, however, is I'm assuming that physics will work similarly in rural and urban areas. I don't see any reason why a broadband service in a home in a rural area might be more impacted by a home network than in an urban area. In fact, quite the opposite due to the propagation characteristics of Wi-Fi in urban area, but we can get into the weeds on that.
Yeah.
But long story short, this is exactly why we need additional major research and documentation efforts. That all of this is data
stepped into that. So let's have you go first to tell us, how are you collecting the data? Now there's a lot of data and a lot of ways you could collect, but a kind of basic, what is the main way that you're doing your speed testing?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the harnessing Google's search engine for data collection is a very powerful resource. Like it's about 750,000 tests a day in the US, about 2 to 3 million globally. But we also have a series of initiatives run by various NGOs. As I mentioned, all of the work that Measurement Lab does is in the public domain. So people will use these tools, integrate it into their own data collection efforts as just one of the metrics they're collecting. We'll be releasing a new platform, I'll call it, a new feature set that will be collecting information about broadband pricing, run a speed test, collect some demographic data. We've worked with a variety of national groups, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance and others, like for, in essence, providing back-end support for those efforts. And for a number of years, we provided back-end support for some of the mapping initiatives of the Federal Communications Commission. So all of these for us are opportunities for growing this public data set. If one goes to measurementlab.net, there's a whole visualization suite so that people can look at data from their own backyards and own communities. That also is all public domain, freely available. And it's just another set of data that people might use to make more informed decisions when they're doing things like looking to become eligible for various pots of federal or state funding.
Yeah. Or developing communities, whether you're going to put a residential community or business community, it helps to know your accessibility to, whatever broadband network. Harry, how about you? Dan, you kind of alluded a little bit, but how are you really getting the data you need to map?
Mine is far more basic, but I am using federal filings provided by the providers, or I'm going to the providers and they're really opening up, and we work well together, we're finding out. They're providing me with what infrastructure data, as long as I don't put it up. Some people say it's okay for me to put up, like the Youngsville TV said it was okay. So if they say it's okay for me to make public, I'll make public. If they want me to keep it private, I'll keep it private, but we're trying to do cost estimates for the whole state. So it's working with federal data, the providers' data, and the counties. So the counties are critical here, because if they provide me the address and parcel data, which all but 2 counties in the state have GIS maps on their sites. So they have the data. And if they provide us with that, we can derive the building data to show exactly where we're stretching that fiber to. Now, we're not going to go and microanalyze every single one, but we can use some metrics like median distances to come up with reasonable numbers with margins of error that they understand, so that we can make estimates for the state. That's really what we're after right here. And using Sascha's data, he gave us permission to use it, but some of the providers were reluctant for me to put that up. So we're trying to be, we're trying to avoid conflict here, but it's all, what we're using is what's provided to us.
Sure, fine line between being really cooperative and getting, but then knowing when we need to push a little to get what we need. So appreciate your being so correct in how you state that. Well, Harry, how is the information you're collecting being used? You talked a little bit about the auction. Are there other things that you and your partners now, and even we, can do with your data now that you've collected it?
Yeah, so I always leave it to the counties or the municipalities to elevate whatever aspect of their community they think is most important. Based on that, we will give them the information, whatever information we can gather, for them to make informed decisions. So if I say I'm using environmental justice, for an example, because right now that data was just updated February 5th, so it's coming. And we know that environmental justice census block groups, again, it's publicly available, just updated February 5th. Those data are available. If you want to elevate those census block groups to resolve the issues for those that need it most, to better enable them to find a pathway forward, then we will give you data that you need based on buildings, based on infrastructure, and help you with a cost analysis based on what the providers have given us for what it costs to provide services to those premises, if it's broadband that you're elevating. Honestly, Extension will do it for whatever economic variable you'd like us to examine.
I, of course, want to ask the same question of Sascha, but I'm curious. I see some educators. We had a lot of educators in our last Grow PA gathering. Are you working, aside from Penn State, where you're obviously, working, are you working with any school districts across the state now that broadband is having so much impact on our ability to deliver to students in their homes? And Harry,
Sascha,
that's kind of for
you
you.
ask Sascha that or me?
Really you, Harry, but Sasha's
Oh, I'm sorry.
comment.
Yeah, so the Pennsylvania Department of Education contacted us last August, right before the schools were opening, and asked us to map out who was, according to FCC filings, who was served and who wasn't. And we did that. We turned it around really fast. If you go onto the site, it's kind of sloppy right now. I was honestly hoping for the new data to be released before I updated them all, but it looks like that's not happening. So what you just looked at actually was one of those maps. That's school district level. Those are our school district maps. So we work directly with the Pennsylvania Department of Education based on their needs. So that way they can identify which one of their students is going to require in-person learning versus who can do it at home.
Great. And I think it's going to be important to us to make sure that our educators, certainly in my footprint, know that information is available, that might be something they use. I know in the early stages of the pandemic, they were, they were calling students to get that information. So any way we can make it more available. So Sascha, it's kind of same question to you. How is your information being used primarily, and what are the opportunities maybe that we aren't even taking right now to use your information?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, our data is being used by a dozen countries around the globe. A lot of the more highly industrialized nations use our data. The US is an outlier in refusing to use the data. It's being used in the back ends of a lot of state maps. I think there's 8 or 10 different states that are using the data in one or other mapping efforts that they're doing. Obviously here in Pennsylvania, we've used it from some of the assessments that we did for the Center for Rural Pennsylvania. It's being used at the more local level to document, in essence, what's been happening on the ground. It's been used in Indian country to sort of document, the lack of connectivity in those locations. And then it's being used, I'm constantly learning of other initiatives I had no idea existed last week that happened to be using this data store. It's a really interesting world we live in. You basically have 2 groups of individuals, those that feel that there's something awry, something wrong, and that we should collect information to describe and document what that is. And then you have a whole group of people that say there's nothing wrong here, but don't collect any data. And that's basically what a lot of this breaks down to. So I've seen time and time again a purposeful refusal to engage in the empirical documentation process that if everything was fine here, I would expect people would want the most data collected possible. Just be like, let's take a victory lap here. But we live in this sort of enforced ignorance, mostly perpetuated by exactly the same individuals that say there's no problem. Mm-hmm. And what I find time and again is the people using these data are using it to document, in essence, what they already know for the most part to be true, but are being told officially that their reality doesn't exist. And I think that's a real shame. I think coronavirus is creating a multi-hundred, maybe 100 billion, maybe multi-trillion-dollar lesson in the opportunity costs associated with our systemic failure to bridge the digital divide on a national scale. And those costs continue to accrue, right? The detrimental impacts on educational outcomes that kids all across the country are currently facing, that will stay with us for a very long time. And the longer that this drags on, the worse that's going to get. there's a real problem in that we do have lightning fast connectivity in some locations, but as we have moved more into a digital economy, as we've put more things online, as the assumption is you're going to pay your taxes, you're going to apply for jobs, you're going to learn online, the discrepancy, the digital divide's actually growing. For those that don't have access to those resources, the detrimental impact of being left behind has never been greater than it is today.
Well, and for rural communities, we know that there's a tremendous opportunity that kind of revealed itself in the last 6 to 9 months and will continue for us to be a place where people want to live, where they're getting out of the more urban areas, they want to come home. But definitely one of our challenges is being able to provide the connectivity that they need to work. So it has real economic impact, in addition to the education here. We know it. And so I'm like you, well, not even begin to get close to you, but a data geek. So I would suggest that I don't think the lack of wanting to pursue data is always intentional. Part of it is, you and I both know that it's a lot of work. So my staff, I'm sure, could just shake their heads at that. Like, I like keeping data. I like knowing things, and I like keeping it in order, and I know the power of it. But it means that you have to be willing to put forth the resources to do it, both time and money. It's costly to keep data. So we have to be willing to make that investment.
I think that's the big lesson here, is that we have squandered literally over $350 million in taxpayer dollars on a series of endless maps that have sucked. Mm-hmm. And so when I come along, like, let's just give 10% to scientists and see what we end up with. Like, when I think about what we could have done with $35 million over the last 10 years within the scientific and research realm, we'd have the best maps on the planet at that point in time. And the fact that
what I love is we can start now. So I'm going to go right to kind of the last question that we had planned. And then I do want to remind everybody, whether you would like a chance to speak, ask a question, or you want to put something in the chat, we want to make sure that you have that opportunity. My kind of last planned question was, what do we need to do now? So knowing that we maybe haven't done the best job on data collection or mapping in the past, today's a new day. So how do we help you make sure that you're getting what you need? Well, I'll just leave it at that. I have some ideas, but tell me what we can do individually, as communities, and encouraging those who are in positions of leadership.
Is that a question for me, Susan, or
let's start with you, and then we'll let Harry answer.
Yeah, I mean, individually, I think the biggest thing we can continue to do is to be the squeaky wheels. That even when we're facing a official reality that doesn't map onto our lived experience, that we need to keep letting people know, like, hey, this isn't actually what we're seeing in our community. Individually, though, there's very little we can't build a national infrastructure, right? So that then requires, in essence, a leadership, and it requires leadership. I've worked with the Trump administration, I've worked with the Obama administration, I'll work with the Biden administration. Like, I don't care, whoever gets her done, like, that's who I'm going to work with, and that does take major investment. That we can't keep messing around with, trying to find a way to do this all for free. The opportunity cost is too great for that. And again, I think, we're finally coming around to the notion that we need to make a multi-$100 billion investment in next generation infrastructure. What that looks like, I've been reading the tea leaves and watching closely. So, like Clyburn's bill, the Data Act, and et cetera, that's going to come up again. And this is Jim Clyburn, in the congressman. That's going to probably drop, if I had to guess, around $100 billion into the collective pot. And that's a good chunk of change. There's no doubt about it. On the other hand, in terms of our broadband mapping, we're still not doing anything around things like collecting pricing information. So the best case scenarios that we end up maps that might have some of the functionality of what Harry's already showed us is possible. but we still won't know, like, what do people actually pay for this service? So we'll end up with things where it's like, oh, you've got 100 megabit service for $1 million a month. And that then we'll declare victory. And I'm like, that's not good enough.
So as one of the things we can do, and again, I'll share this out at the end, but you've told me how exactly I can do mapping. In my neighborhood, which you confirmed has no speed data available at the moment, other than if I've run the test in the last week or two.
Yep.
I could share with my neighbors, with my community, how they can go ahead and run a simple speed test, which becomes part of your data. And as we stay connected to you, that becomes information that we can use to be that squeaky wheel. Because it's really hard to be the squeaky wheel if I just go out and say, oh man, I've got really bad connection. When my kids come home, I can't watch Netflix and. But if we're really contributing to the data collected and then can reference that and work with our local leaders, is that a reasonable way to leverage our individual power?
Absolutely. I mean, that is, in terms of agency, that is fully 100% within our individual control. And, we need to keep not just asking, but demanding that our legislators prioritize what we see as, I think, rightfully a critical issue, which is that in a digital economy, in a digital era, too many of us simply don't have access to the fundamental resource we need to fully participate in a 21st century economy. And that is a non-negotiable, and should be treated as such.
Well, and I, again, seeing particularly educators on the call and chambers of commerce, as we share that information about the speed testing, I would encourage them to share that with their students and with their members and encourage them to participate in the speed mapping so that you'll have more data. Harry, I want to hear from you too. How can we help you get more data, more accurate data? Where can are there things we can do individually to help you, or is it encouraging our counties and our providers to be more forthcoming? What can we do to help you?
Well, for the county, yeah, let's work together. Like, I haven't run it yet, but Warren County a long time ago gave me the parcel data for Warren County. I haven't pushed it, and right now most of the counties I'm working with are in the southeast part of the state, only because they came forward. They said, we want you to do this. But here's the one that we miss, I think. This is just my personal perspective. There's a big portion of our population that's not included in any of these conversations. These are the guys that are getting the $10 a month support, and they're not taking that because it's like, we're a separate society. We don't traditionally communicate with you. We're our own segment, and we don't count. And the only way you can get them involved, we have to find ways forward for them by communicating with them. Now, I know that Lifeline's talking about moving up to $50 a month, I believe, for subsidies for households. A lot of these households have children, but they're disengaged. They have kids, they're disengaged, and reaching out to them first and engaging them will give you the biggest economic return, in my opinion, for your public dollar. So those that were traditionally excluded, put those guys first. And honestly, COVID's put a big damper on that.
Yeah, and so
I'll tell you, in Charleston,
to do that, we're probably going to need the assistance of our human services departments in county level, our nonprofits, and our schools. They're who are going to have access to those students and their families.
They will, but I will tell you that we found cooperation with Comcast, of all people, when I was in North Charleston, South Carolina. They provided free service. I said, I'm going to provide you with free customers. I said, we're going to educate them on how to use the internet. You give me free service, the city's going to give me free buildings, and Clemson's throwing their computers away. So I'm going to take them and put Linux software on them so that they're fast again, and we'll use those. We did this successfully. We know it works. And that's the sort of thing, whatever assets we have that we can use that aren't being used, let's collaborate and see if we can put some stuff up for people to use.
Yeah. And I think, along with my comments about data collection, the average person is probably not all that attuned to how you effectively collect data, use it, store it. We're talking about technology here. It's the same way. I'm a few years out from my days as a telecom manager, and some things haven't changed, but a lot has. So again, when you're talking to someone who just wants to, I always used to say, when I put phones on people's desks, and the only thing they cared about was that they knew where the hold key was and they had a long cord. They didn't really care about anything else. It's got to work. So we really can't expect the average, worker or person to really understand all the technology. But what we know is they want it to work on the other end. So for those of us who do understand and we have the influence, we are in positions of leadership, it's really important that we educate ourselves and are able to leverage that to help those who can't. So I think I asked this question when we met for the Grow PA gathering. If I didn't, ask it for the first time. If I did, I'm going to ask it again. Will there be a day when we all just turn on broadband, our internet, our computers, the way we turn on water? And we know, unfortunately, in some of our rural communities, we have households without water. But the perfect scenario is that everybody has what they need. Do you see a future where we can bring that to our communities?
I think universal baseline connectivity is coming for sure. We can't have a modern, we're already an outlier amongst highly industrialized countries. That discrepancy is getting worse. But, whether it is, this decade or sometime into the future is really the question before us. And how much damage will accrue in the interim is really the concern that I and many others share on this. But yeah, there'll always be 99 point something% that are connected. And that's a reality. But I'd love to get to there as opposed to where we are right now, where it's like, yeah, it's about 70 to 80%. And it's been sort of flatlined for the last half decade. That's no good, to be sure. And as soon as we were to increase, broadband today is shockingly slow in terms of its official definition. Eventually, we're going to have to up that to 100 meg or a gig connectivity as the baseline. And not some far future date, but this decade. And that's going to then require a concomitant investment in major infrastructure. So we did this, right? We did this with telephones. We did this with primary education. We did this with roads. We did this with electricity. Like, this is not a new idea, but we need to move internet service from the luxury good, doesn't need immediate attention, into the critically important essential good that it is in today's economy. That's going to take leadership from our elected officials, and it's going to take support and at times prodding from us as individuals to get them there.
Great. Well, I'm excited to see that happen, and certainly want to, from my position of leadership, help that to happen. I want to remind everyone that we are happy to take questions. I don't see a lot there. Any of you that know me know I can continue to talk with Harry and Sascha for a little bit, but I do want to make sure that you have the opportunity. If you'd like to be unmuted or you want to throw something in the chat, please just interrupt me here and throw something out there. Any questions or comments?
I am going to add something here that just happened last week. Was with Berks County, Pennsylvania. They gave us their parcel data and asked us to run their data in comparison to what the FCC filings were. And we were able to give them a return of who had what at what speed according to those filings, which I think most of us know are fairly flawed, but at least it was something to start with. Because if we're writing a proposal, we have to use that public data, those public data. Right. I mean, if I'm claiming something, either I have to use something like Sascha's data. I have to have something to back up what my proposal is trying to resolve. I have to say, based on this, based on that. I was using the Form 477 FCC filings, and we said, here's who says they're, here's who, according to those filings, have served, and here's who's not. And they were making decisions based on that, and that was pretty encouraging.
Yeah, when I hear you talk about the parcel data, I'm going to just assume that it's the same thing that I occasionally pull up from our county. I go into Parcel Viewer to see who owns the house next door, who bought the property downtown. It's available here in Venango County. I don't know how it stacks up against others, but I would say there's another opportunity for us is to get familiar with our county's collection of data with our parcel viewer, and encourage our county leadership that if that needs more work, more attention, I'm pretty confident in saying here in Venango County, we've generally had a GIS person. We've got a great planning office, but it's something that I took for granted for a long time. Didn't really even know why it mattered to me. And in my position now, I know that they play an important role in economic development and what goes on even in my own neighborhood. So another place where we can use our influence.
Yes, and if you, here's my plug for Penn State Extension. If you provide me with those files, I'll run the data for you. And by the way, I will use those to make our case for the next auction and the 100 billion that Sascha was just talking about. By the way, that was working with Jim Clyburn in South Carolina that got me going on that Linux stuff years ago. So.
Great. Well, I'm going to kind of start our wrap up here because I don't see any questions coming up. No one seems to be raising their hands, but I know I'd like to stay in touch with both of you. Are you accessible if there are others on the call here that feel like they may have an opportunity? We'd love to share your contact information. Of course, we're going to tell them how to get to your data. Are you willing to work with stakeholders out here in our neck of the woods and across the state to be helpful?
Always.
Yeah, I think both of us are already thoroughly immersed in a large number of projects all across the state. So yes, we will continue to be a resource to our communities and to surrounding folks across the state.
And the more we engage with one another, the more we can interconnect and come up with wholesale solutions. And that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, well, this has been a great opportunity for me. I have to, give a shout out to the Philadelphia Chamber and the Grow PA Initiative, who brought me into the conversation, one that I was excited to be part of. They provided me with an introduction to the two of you, and now I'm in the process of trying to meet all of the other players that are involved in this, and hope that the outcome is that we're really collaborative, that that our next get together is in 3 weeks. Sascha, you'll be back with me. I hope everyone on the call will join us. Harry, I certainly invite you in as well. Jill Foys will be with us. We want to talk about funding. So we need to understand, where is funding coming from, where there may be opportunities that we may not know about that are available to our municipalities, to stakeholders. And we know that a lot of those funding opportunities come with some hoops to jump through, strings attached. So what do we need to know to make sure that we are best positioned to access funding for broadband going forward? We had not planned for, but we may want to talk about at some point the various ways to get connectivity to people. So I think some of what you're doing, may actually represent different types of delivery, but maybe we would want to talk about that. I know that sometimes we think about a wire on a pole, but there are other ways to get people connected. And some of them are going to require some pretty visionary thinking to make that happen, and a lot of collaboration. So maybe we'll see if we can throw something in there. And then, of course, we'd love to have a broadband roundtable. So we want to give all the providers a chance to come together and tell us, I don't want to say their side of the story, because I'm hoping it's everybody's side of the story, but how do we help better support them to help us get to the solutions that we want, and maybe better understand where they're struggling with, how they can do that really effectively. We want the reputation of all of our providers to be great. We want them to be partners. So we'd love to bring them together. So if you either are a provider of broadband on this call today, or one, they need to get to me and let me know. We'll make sure that they're invited to be around that round table, and all of you can be there as well. I do see that Luke Browler would like to make a comment. He's with Child Development Centers here in Venango County. So Luke, I'd welcome you. You want? Yeah.
Hi, thanks. I try not to miss an opportunity to speak up for our kids and families. So I know I was really happy to see this meeting come together, because I guess this is a new concern for me recently, because we, with COVID-19, back in, let's say November, we had to put our Head Start program to 100% remote for most of November, December, and January. And we serve, between Venango County and Crawford County, we have 440 Head Start kids, so between the ages of 3 and 5. And when we decided to go remote, in my mind, I was thinking, well, our teachers will teach through Google Classroom. Most everybody's got internet, no problem. And then we talked about, well, what about people that don't have internet? Well, we'll do some learning packets for them and deliver them. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, it's a handful of people. The amount of requests we got for those learning packets was probably, I don't know, 50% ballpark. And every week we were delivering just bins and bins and bins of these learning packets because families either did not have internet or they couldn't afford it. The only internet, parents had was on their phone. And they didn't want to use their minutes to do preschool education with their kids. So really, just for me, it was really opened my eyes to, wow, hey, this is an issue moving forward, especially, with that, however long COVID's going to last and then just beyond that. But, so I was really happy just to see people talking about it.
Great. Thanks, Luke, for joining us today. We know that this is impacting so many in our community, and it's important that we hear your stories. I would encourage any of you that have similar comments, if you don't offer them today, get in touch with me. I know I see Senator Hutchison's on the call. I see other leadership. I think we want to hear from you out in the community and know what your realities are. That's what allows us to prioritize and move things ahead. And I see one of the providers is interested. We're going to make sure you're all included. And Sascha, thank you for sharing your email. So with that, I thank Harry and Sascha for their time today. I must thank the members of the Venango Chamber because they are who provide the funding, the support that I can be here today and convene these kind of conversations. We will share the links to Harry and Sascha's information, their contacts, their work, the recording of today, and the recording from our previous Grow PA. So if you weren't part of that, I'd encourage you to go back and take a look at that. You can visit venangochamber.org/broadband, and everything will be sitting right there conveniently for you. So we do invite you to join us again in 3 weeks on March 9th. We'll be learning about the broadband funding. Registration is open on our website now, so don't wait. Just jump on there and register to join us, and we'll send you reminders so that you can be part of that conversation as well. And then again, the provider roundtable in the future, watch for that. You'll register at the same location as soon as we've set that up. And if you know of other conversations around broadband we should be including, we're happy to put them into the mix. So I thank you for joining us today. It's certainly been my pleasure. Stay safe, stay connected.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.